Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Nexiphor Cast, where we highlight forward-thinking leaders who are shaping the industry. Today, I have a truly special guest, Marcus Selmon of Property Investor Partners. Marcus, thank you very much for joining me today.
Very glad to be here, Dora.
Absolutely. Marcus, can you give us an introduction about yourself and tell us how you got started as a business in the first place?
Yeah. I am the CEO of Property Investor Partners, which is part of a group of companies which own about 500 plus properties in the north of England and operates them as a portfolio of properties, mainly renting out to residential tenants. I'm also the chair of PLAN, which is the Portfolio Landlords Action Network, which is a group of landlords who've got more than 75 properties. In that group, we have the largest landlords who have emerged in the private rented sector in the last 40 years, who's got 1,500. But what your listeners may be surprised to hear, that from our calculations, there are actually fewer than 300 landlords in the country with more than 75 properties. There are definitely bigger players in the housing association market, and there are bigger players in the build-to-rent market. But in the private rented sector, or as it's known, buy-to-let, the vast majority of people have fewer than 4 properties. And that's why if you apply for a mortgage and you've got more than 4 properties, they classify you as a portfolio landlord because there are so few of them.
Okay, awesome. And can you tell us how did you get into the property overall?
Well, I was working as a solicitor and I decided that I didn't particularly want to do that. I wanted to invest in other businesses. And my wife and I were in the north of England, and we saw that you could buy properties in the north of England for about £50,000 and get a return of, say, 10 to 12%. And I thought, that's an interesting opportunity. They may not be properties that have got great capital growth potential, but supposing you had 10, 20 or 30 of them, you would actually have a property business. And I formed a company and found a partner who was actually living in the north of England, who was an experienced landlord himself. And we basically started off building a first portfolio to test the model, discovered it worked, and then decided that instead of trying to expand using buy-to-let finance, mortgage finance, we would try and find an investor or investors who could give us a reasonably substantial sum of money. And in 2019, we made contact with the family office who invested, not a huge sum of money, but a few million pounds. And with them, we have basically built the 550 properties that we own today. We came to a bit of a stop in 2023 because we wanted to wait for the Renters Reform Bill to come in. Actually, we've been sort of waiting for something to happen there because obviously everyone expected the Renters Reform Bill to be in by the end of the Conservative government. No one expected that they would not be able to pass it. And so having waited till then, we decided to wait until the current Renters' Rights Act came in and take those rules on board. And then once we've got those on board, and assuming that lots of landlords will be selling, that's when we'll be expanding again.
Okay, awesome. And as being in this industry as long as you've been, what are like some what are some like say some challenges you are facing in the private rental sector, I can say?
I think the biggest challenge is going to be for the vast majority of landlords who've got fewer than 4 properties. I can't see it making sense for many of them to carry on in the market. And the reason why is because they've come into this market on the basis that it will be a passive investment. Many of them are older people who, particularly when interest rates were very low, said, look, I'm sitting on £200,000-300,000. Why don't I put it into a property? I can buy a property, 2 properties, and I'll just sit there and the letting agent will look after it for me. And it's a passive income and I get property growth and I get income. I think the difference now with the Renters' Rights Act is that you can't be a passive landlord because even if you've got a letting agent, you are going to be on the hook for anything that goes wrong. You are going to be identified by people like Shelter, by people like no win, no fee landlords, by the local authority, and they are going to be coming after you, not the letting agent, if there's a problem. And I think that's going to mean that many landlords are going to go, oh, no, wait, let me invest in stocks and shares. But on the other hand, what we're expecting at Plan is that bigger landlords will start to emerge, that professional landlords will find ways to grow. And that's what we're trying to encourage. We're trying to help find new ways for bigger landlords to emerge, because we believe that the market needs bigger landlords to lead the way for the future.
Yeah. Okay. And based on your perspective, what is like the future of the private rental sector, maybe in the upcoming 5 or 10 years?
Well, I think the future is massive change.
Yeah.
I can't see it carrying on as it has done. But equally, the reason I'm pessimistic in the short term, but also optimistic in the long term, is that a lot of the rules and regulations, once they've actually come on board, once people have actually seen how they operate, will mean that new investors, new players in the market will know what they're getting into. And assuming it's not litigated out of existence, which I don't think it will be, they'll know how to get into the market, cope with all the new rules, and be able to make a success of it. Because if you've got enough scale, I think you can cope with these rules. In fact, I think a lot of larger players will find these rules attractive because there'll be a barrier to entry to small investors. But there's no question about it. It's going to be a challenging time until we've taken these new rules on board. On the other hand, I think the idea that the private rented sector is going to disappear and that somehow housing associations, local authorities, build to rent people are going to take over the market is a fantasy. I mean, let's take build to rent as a good example, Dorant.
Sure.
A lot of people listening to the press, listening to what's being said in the media, might think that build to rent is going to be the silver bullet and that there's loads and loads of build to rent properties. But what they would be surprised to hear is that although billions has gone into build to rent with huge players, people like BlackRock, Legal and General, they might be surprised to hear that in the last 10 years, they've only built about 120,000 properties. Now, 120,000 properties is a lot. And if you're somebody like Legal and General and you're operating thousands of them, it's a fantastic business. But you're talking 120,000 in a market of 5 million. They're not going to go from 120,000 to a million. You know, I've spoken to the head of Legal and General, and even he agrees that's not going to happen. They might double over the next 5 to 10 years. So they're not going to be the solution. The solution is going to be a new type of player coming into the market who definitely will be bigger. I see the average landlord in the future being more like, say, 1,000 to 5,000 properties, who will have the skills and the tech to be able to make it work, who will be able to show other landlords how to operate, and will be in a better place to negotiate with local authorities in terms of how they are operating and getting them on side. And I think that will be the future. But to get from where we are to that future, the next 2 to 3 years, yes, they are going to be very tough, very tough.
Yeah. And also for those who are in this industry, how can they like survive and keep going on this journey?
Well, I think there are three things you've got to do. First of all, you've got to recognise that there is some logic behind what the government wants to achieve.
Yeah.
And you've got to recognise that in order to operate, you've got to be a lot more professional and you've got to take a lot more time, care and trouble over your administration. Now, many landlords, I've spoken to many landlords, and the problem is, if you're not used to doing things in a proper professional way, you know, if you just do things on a telephone call in the back of an envelope, the idea of keeping lots of, you know, paperwork seems like a complete waste of time. And particularly if you're even larger landlords, even larger members of our group, often are operating with 2, 3 or 4 people, you know, you can't do it. I mean, take us. We cannot cope with these rules with our existing structure. We are going to more than double our staff. You've got to be prepared to make that investment in order to get the return. So I think it's going to require a complete mind shift for people who are in the market to survive. But I think those who do survive are going to find that there will be benefits, because if you've got a portfolio that is compliant with the rules, I think you've got a much more valuable asset, because anyone who's looking to come into the market or is looking to invest with you will think, well, you know what you're doing. You know, you're on good terms with the local authority. You're not being sued all the time. You've
Hmm.
got the ability to cope if there are tenants who don't pay rent for a year or 2 years or whatever it's going to be, and then you're a good, you're a business. I mean, it's like running a shop. It's very difficult to run a shop if you're a sole trader and there's shoplifting going on, because every time it happens, you've got a nightmare. But obviously, big companies accept that shoplifting is just, it's a cost of doing business and they can cope with it, even though it appears to be somewhat out of control.
Yeah.
So I do believe that the long term will be good because people will up the standard, and it will be good for tenants because tenants will get a much better service, and it will mean that the market will be encouraging bigger landlords to come into the market, and those landlords will have the scale to cope. So I'm optimistic overall.
Okay. And as you mentioned, like how these people can survive in this market, what about if they want to grow even more? How they will grow in this market once they survive, I
Well,
should say.
that is another very good question. I think what's going to have to happen, and we are in discussions with various lenders about this, is that you are going to need a new form of finance for the private renter sector. Now,
Yeah.
if you look at the market at the moment, like I say, the vast majority, there's over 2 million landlords. Apparently 90% of them have fewer than 4 properties. So there's a huge market for a mortgage company that is looking to create a mortgage for a person who's got 1 property, they've got a job, and what you're doing is creating a product for that person who is able to, through a mortgage broker, to buy the property, is able to support the property with their existing job, and is not really a professional landlord. What you now need is to find people coming into the market who will finance landlords in a different way. We're looking to see if we can find lenders who will support bigger companies, who will treat bigger companies as a business, not a property investment, and will give them funding to be able to buy new properties, as you used to get in the older days,
Yeah.
in order to be able to expand their portfolios. Or investors who see the potential of the market and want to work with professional landlords and see that there's an opportunity for them, which is what happened to us. I mean, our investor, we meet 2 or 3 times a year. We talk on the phone now and then, but from their point of view, it's in terms of the time and effort the investment has involved in relation to
Yeah.
the returns they've got, it's been a fantastic investment. And what's good about it is that it doesn't, on the whole, touch wood, involve many major problems. You get lots of day-to-day problems, but on the whole, it's not like, for example, investing, say, £50 million to develop a site into 100 flats and then suddenly having some sort of major problem as a result of which the whole investment falls apart. We're invested in lots and lots of little properties, and even if one property, say one property exploded and we hadn't insured it, it wouldn't be the end of the portfolio. We could have
Yeah.
absorbed that loss. So I think the future is going to be very, very different from the past. Exactly how it will look, I don't know. But what I do think is that as people see the opportunity, new types of financing will come in. And that's what Plan is committed to doing. We're talking to investors, we're talking to financial mortgage lenders and saying, look, this market needs a new type of finance. Help us to develop it.
Okay. And also, Marcus, I wanted to ask you a question from the business side, which I asked to all my guests. So let's say
Yep.
if you would have like a magic wand that would solve maybe two to three business problems that would help you make me scale faster and make more money. What will those be?
If I had a magic wand, what? Um, okay. The magic wand for us was finding an investor who was prepared to advance a very large sum of money to build a portfolio. Because at the end of the day, the type of properties we're dealing with, you just can't go and buy them with a mortgage. If you're buying properties at 50,000, you
Yeah.
need to have a few £100,000 in the bank and buy 7 or 8 at once. Even bridging finance is a very expensive way of acquiring them. And then once you've bought them, it's extremely easy to take 25 properties to a bank and remortgage it and pay off the investment. But it's very difficult to buy them. So the magic wand, as far as I'm concerned and Plan Members is concerned, is to find people who are willing to partner up with us and invest the upfront money to create portfolios, knowing that at the end they'll get the money back and have a great investment. I think that the second magic wand that would work for me is to try and attract people into this market who've got the ability to present themselves in a very different way that will persuade all the stakeholders in the market that there is not something evil about private landlords. There is, unfortunately, a very, very bad reputation that private landlords seem to have acquired, which really hampers the ability of private landlords to operate. Now, if you look at build to rent, that's got a completely different rep. You know, government ministers are very happy to meet with build to rent players, to be friends with them, to help them. And the reason why, I believe, is not because there's something inherently better about build to rent. At the end of the day, they're building properties and renting them. But the big difference is this. They are coming to the government with a specific sum of money that is large enough to get their attention. Now, if you look at the whole buy-to-let market, it's apparently trillions of pounds. So those 2 million investors have got much bigger investment than build to rent. But the difference is having 2 million people who each put £100,000 in, as opposed to having one person who says, say, for example, in Manchester, I'm going to come to your town, I'm going to invest 50 million, will you help me? That's the sort of player who is going to get the government, the local authority on side. And my magic wand would be to get players like that to come into the market, even if they don't invest with me. Because once one of those people has come to that market and persuaded, say, someone like the Mayor of Manchester to work with them, then other people will go, oh, look, wait a minute, that's worked. And then maybe you'll get help from the Mayor of Liverpool and the Mayor of Newcastle and all the different other mayors who are concerned about the lack of housing for people who are private tenants. So that would be my two magic wands if I could make them happen. And that's what Plan's trying to do.
Awesome. And like before we wrap up, where can our listeners and maybe potential investors reach out to you in the future?
Yes, of course. Always happy to hear from people. Are you going to put my details up? Yeah, I'm very happy to speak to anyone who is interested in investing in this market, or anyone who is a larger landlord and is interested in joining together with Plan. I don't charge a fee for doing it. It's a purely private network of people who, if I may say so, have become friends over the 2 or 3 years we've been together, who are trying to help each other face the challenges of being a landlord in this very challenging market. So more than happy to talk to anybody.
Okay, awesome. So Marcus, thank you very much for being part of this episode.
Great.
It was super fun, insightful, and inspirational conversation. And for everyone who is watching, keep growing, keep thriving. And I will see you on the next episode.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you.